Hi everybody, my name is Warren and welcome to Work with Warren, the channel where you can watch me create the life of my dreams through thrift, hustle, and DIY. Today's project has been on the list since the day that we moved in, which is that we have this fantastic deck out back, but there is zero privacy between us and the neighbors and the laneway out back. So I'm going to DIY a wood slat privacy wall as well as thrift a great seating solution from Facebook Marketplace. This is my first full-length video on YouTube, so if at any point you feel inspired to hit the like button below or perhaps even subscribe, please do so. I'd be forever grateful. It would help me out with the YouTube algorithm. Without any more preamble though, let's get into today's video. Okay, so this is what our deck is currently looking like. It functions perfectly fine. We've got this sectional and these privacy screens that I picked up from Lowe's. However, you can tell they don't look like they really fit in the space. I've just zip tied them to the railing. The first thing that I needed to do was get rid of everything, so I actually sold the sectional and the privacy panels to my neighbor. And as you can see, when you take them down, there's just like zero divide between us and the neighbor's deck there. And I gave everything a good power wash. Okay, let's take a look at what's available for purchase. I saw this $40 piece from Rona, and I'm like, maybe I could stack those, but when I went to go look at it in real life, the materials were just garbage and there's no visual barrier. These aluminum pieces are pretty much exactly what I'm looking for, except for I want them in wood, and I would need about 4 of these to cover the area that I want, and they're $300 each. So they do, Wayfair also sells them in wood too, but they're like $325 for a 3-foot panel, so I'm looking again at minimum 4 of those, and it wouldn't even cover the area properly, so I knew I could do better. If cheap and sustainable are options, I will always take those up first. So I head over to Facebook Marketplace and lo and behold, someone is giving away a bunch of floorboards that they've ripped up in a reno. In my mind, I'm like, this is great, they're hardwood. I didn't realize that these old floorboards were still tongue and groove. For some reason, I thought that they would just be flat boards. That wasn't the case, but I'm like, no problem, I can just rip out those nails. And there was about 170 boards, so I got to ripping out those nails. Once the nails were out, all I had to do to remove the tongue and groove was to run each and every single floorboard through my table saw twice, once on each side to remove about 1/4 inch of material. Once that was done, I had to chop everything down with my miter saw to the preferred length for the 3 sections of railing that I wanted to cover with this privacy panel. And after all of that, I took some wood filler and filled in both sides of every single nail hole. Okay, so just to recap, up until this point, I've spent about 4 afternoons working on this project. I know it doesn't look like I've spent that long because I've trimmed down the footage, but remember, there's like 170 pieces of wood, each that needed to go through on both sides through the table saw. So that's like 300 and something passes through my table saw to cut off the tongue and the groove. And then I pulled out all the nails, filled in all the holes with wood filler, right? Like this took some time. In the back of my mind, there's this voice that's like, maybe you should like just sand just to see how long it's going to take. And I'm like, no, it'll be fine. It was in fact not fine. I started sanding. Why didn't I film, you ask? Because there's 170 pieces that I could have filmed, right? And so I started sanding just to get like a little bit done. It took me 1 hour to get 6 of the medium size, medium length pieces of wood sanded down to raw wood. Then I'm looking at this giant pile of wood and I'm like, well, if that took 1 hour and it's gonna take me all fucking summer. Not a chance in hell am I going to do that. So this was the moment, and I have this in like almost every DIY project. There's at least one moment where I'm like, do I just give in? Do I just throw in the towel? Do I just buy this from the store? Is this worth it? Is this worth what I'm going through to do this? If you do DIY as well, and you have those moments too, please let me know in the comments below so that I don't feel so alone. So anyway, I knew all along I could just buy 2x6s, run them through my table saw, get 1/4-inch thick strips out of them, and I could use that. I wanted to be sustainable. I was trying to do the right thing. I was trying to show you how cheaply you could make this project. Anyway, so here we go. I'm starting again. I'm just gonna buy 2x6s. I know that the quality is gonna be better. I know that it's gonna be more of what I want in the end. And I know that it's gonna hold up for longer as well, because even with all the wood filler, like the floorboards were brittle, they were old. I think that there would have been rotting issues. So we're going the 2x6 route, and let's just see how that goes. So of course, starting from scratch is rough, but I am happy that I'm going to be able to get the exact quality that I want out of this build with new materials. So I ran to the hardware store, I grabbed some pressure treated 2x6s, I chopped them down to size with my miter saw, and then I began running them through my table saw, getting a 1/4-inch slice at a time. Oh, if this is brutal for you, it was just as brutal for me. I actually held on to this for like 5 passes before I had to change out the blade. I didn't realize how dull the blade was with the thin floorboards. And I gotta say that there are very few moments in my life that make me feel like a man, but changing the saw blade made me feel like a man, so that was a bonus. And now it is like a hot knife through butter. This was so much easier. I got about 14 1/4-inch strips out of each 2x6. I thought that I was so clever by flipping my belt sander on its back and then running the boards over the belt to sand them, but it didn't really save me any time at all compared to the orbital sander, so I just went with that to sand down all of the strips here to make sure that there was no major splinters hanging off. And after everything was sanded, it was time to weatherproof all the slats. Half of the boards I used this Minwax Poly Shades, which is a stain and poly combo, and I did 2 coats on each board here. The other half I wanted to leave in a natural tone, so I used this Olympic Water Guard waterproofer. Same thing, I did 2 coats on each side of each slat. I bought some pressure-treated 2x2s to use as the supports for each panel, so I chopped those down to the height that I wanted them at and gave them all a sand, again, just to make sure that there's no splinters. Before committing to anything, I laid down the slats in this striped pattern, which was the first time that I was getting very excited about this project because it looked exactly like how I thought it would. I grabbed the 2x2s, I zip tied them to the railing. Even though this is a custom project, it is super renter friendly. You can easily take down these panels within seconds just by cutting the zip ties. So I used a level, I leveled the top slat on the 2x2s, I nailed it into place, and then I used a paint stir stick, which is about a 1/4 inch thick, as a spacing guide for each slat that went below that. And I was having a bit of coordination issues here, so I had to get my husband's help to set up the first panel, although I had no problems doing the second and third panel by myself, even though they are much larger. but I do appreciate his help, and this was satisfying watching this all come together, and especially because everything else took so long and this was moving so quickly. This was easily the most satisfying part of the project. The base of the wood pole was a little bit thicker, so I had to cut off about ½ an inch from the bottom 4 slats. So they had a nice snug fit there, but it turned out perfect. The second panel flew up super quick now that I had the hang of it. I did the exact same process, just leveled the very top slat and then nail gunned the rest in using a paint stir stick as a spacing guide. These shots are actually a couple of weeks later because I had burnt out the motor on my table saw cutting the original set of slats, like on the very last one. But I found another table saw, the exact same one, on Marketplace for $75, and then I finished up the rest of these ones for the third panel. While I'm finishing up this panel, let's talk project costs. So I spent $115 taxes in on the wood, $50 on the steam poly and waterproofer, and I spent about $15 on brad nails, zip ties, and sanding pads. So altogether taxes in, you're looking at about $180 Canadian. Now I'm not counting the table saw and the blade, which I already had, but that would add $105 to this project. To finish off this panel, I wanted to give it a bit of flair, so I tied a string to a chalk pencil and used my finger as a pivot point to draw out a quarter round there. And I was going to use my jigsaw to cut this out, but I tried with my circular saw and it worked perfectly fine. And replacing the original sectional that was out here, I snatched this 3-piece daybed sectional from Marketplace for $75. There's so much more lounge space. I actually got 2 of them for $150. I'm hoping to sell the other one for $150 on its own, which will cover the cost of this, but it'll keep you posted. And I'm not going to do a full before and after of this because this is actually just part 1 of the makeover. I have a few smaller projects that I'm going to do to really make this feel like a homey space. So stay tuned because that will be the next video that I post. But in the meantime, just enjoy how the space turned out. That's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end. If you like what you saw, please give me a like or perhaps leave a comment below. If you want to see more of this 30-something-year-old guy doing arts and crafts on the internet, please subscribe. There's plenty more where this came from. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.